Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. This is kicking off a busy week here on the channel because there is bound to be lots of news coming out of CinemaCon, which is happening right now in Las Vegas. I'd hoped to be covering it from Vegas to bring you all of the news firsthand, but when I asked to cover it as a member of the press, they said, no thank you, so I will be covering it from here. That's okay though, I'm sure there'll be lots of exciting stuff, so stay tuned. I don't know exactly when those uploads are going to be, but there's always some big movie news. But the big movie news today is the performance of Snow White in its second weekend, where it was actually toppled from the #1 spot by the new Jason Statham film, A Working Man. And there are so many numbers to break down. It's really a catastrophic performance for Snow White here, as we sort of previewed on last week's show. But let's take a look at the box office top 10 for this past weekend. At #1, as I mentioned, is A Working Man, which debuted with $15.5 million. Even given its pretty bad debut, it was a mild to moderate surprise that Snow White wasn't able to hang on to #1 for another week. I do think the tea leaves were there when you look at the cinema score, etc. from last week. That 66% drop put it in second place at $14.3 million. Its domestic total right now is about $67 million. The Chosen Last Supper Part 1, which is the first of 3 consecutive weeks of Chosen movies, which are basically the episodes of the TV show put together, hitting theaters, had a surprising as well performance with $11.7 million. That was a lot higher than most people had it. Blumhouse's The Woman in the Yard was in 4th place at $9.3 million. It was able to overcome reviews that weren't very good to hit that #4 spot. A24's Death of a Unicorn, which you think would be a little bit more buzzy than the latest Blumhouse film, was only able to debut in 5th place at $5.7 million. In 6th place was the 4K restoration of Princess Mononoke, which wasn't in a whole lot of theaters, only about 300 nationwide. It was still able to bring in $3.8 million. That brings the domestic total for that film so far up to $14.7 million. Captain America Brave New World dropped 27.4% to bring in another $2.9 million. It is now steaming toward that $200 million mark. Well, steaming, I think crawling might be a more apt description. Black Bag dropped 48.4% in its third week, bringing in $2.1 million. Its domestic total is now at 18.7. Mickey 17 dropped 47.4% in week #4 with a $1.9 million weekend. Its domestic total now at $43.6 million. And Novocaine drops from in the top 5 to number 10 with a 58.9% drop from last weekend, another $1.4 million, and an $18.8 million domestic total. With all the newcomers, we had a 50% turnover in the top 10 from last weekend. Dogman is out after 8 weeks. The Monkey is out after 5 weeks. The Day the Earth Blew Up is out after 2 weeks, followed by the other Last Supper movie, which I guess is really just kind of warming up the top 10 for Last Supper movies. It's out after 2 weeks. And The Alto Knights, which was reportedly a favorite of Warner Brothers head David Zaslav, is out of the top 10 after just 1 week. Looking at the biggest theater count changes for the past weekend, The Day the Earth Blew Up lost about half of its theaters, 1,343 of them. It's now in 1,360. A24's Opus crashed out of theaters in its third weekend. It lost 1,232 theaters, remaining in only 29, so it essentially almost went out of release altogether. Novocaine dropped 1,096 theaters. It's now in 2,273. Last Breath lost a big chunk of its remaining theaters, 1,082 of them. It's now in 437. And Mickey 17 lost 936 theaters. It's now in 1,648. This is a look at the more and more ironically named Road to Recovery. The blue line is the box office weekend average for 2015 to 2019. The red line is the weekend average from 2021 to 2024. And the dotted black line is the weekend performance for every week this year. And March was pretty consistent in that we were performing below the baseline, not just pre-pandemic, but since theaters reopened as well. It is the end of the month, so we'll see how we're doing cumulatively versus last year. But it was a March to forget at the box office, despite some high-profile names. And the most high-profile of those, of course, is Snow White. This past weekend's box office performance pretty much cemented what we saw with the debut weekend, which is that this is not going to be a financial success and had even less audience appeal than I anticipated. To be quite frank, I didn't expect a 66% drop. That's not very good for a superhero movie that opens to $150 million. It's disastrous for a family film that opened to around $40 million. And we're starting to get a better idea of just how it's going to turn out financially, thanks to an article that ran yesterday in Deadline. Now, this is kind of unusual because the trades don't usually run detailed articles about how much a movie is going to lose. And this is not just at the box office. This is taking into account all ancillaries and revenue streams. And Deadline in particular often kind of runs cover for the studios and downplays stories like this. But it ran a story yesterday mapping out what the expected revenues and the expenses for Snow White are. So this is how Deadline runs the numbers. As far as revenue goes, they are saying that the movie is expected to bring in $101 million in net box office revenue. I'm not so sure about that. We're going to look at my numbers in a couple minutes. Then $62 million in home entertainment revenue. So that would be Blu-ray, any type of physical media, as well as video on demand, digital rentals, etc. And then $130 million in streaming and TV revenue and $2 million in merchandising. One big caveat on that streaming and TV revenue that would bring in $130 million, which would be the movie's biggest revenue stream. A lot of that money would come from Disney, because the way that it works is, in order to have exclusive rights to Snow White to stream on Disney Plus, which I'm sure it will, the Disney Plus division pays the Disney Films division that amount of money to say that they're getting fair compensation for their movie. But what it really is one division of Disney paying another division of Disney. So the numbers may look better on the balance sheet for Snow White specifically, but that money is just coming out of a different part of the company. And this is one of the things that we talk about with streaming and destabilizing the entire way that movies are made. Let's say that Disney Plus didn't exist. The money that Disney would get for Snow White for, let's say, its first window of streaming would come from Netflix or HBO or one of the other streamers that used to exist. And it would be money coming from outside of the company, but that's just not the way it works anymore. The studios with major streaming services are often paying themselves, quote unquote, the money to put their movies on their own streaming services. And that's one of the reasons why people say that Sony made the smartest move, because they don't have a streaming service. They have a deal with Netflix. So Sony movies go straight to Netflix as their first streaming window, and Netflix pays Sony money. That's an external revenue stream, and it's one that a lot of studios don't have because they opted to start their own streaming services. Now, as far as expenses, Deadline quotes the production budget of $270 million, which is what we talked about here on the show last week. That's generally agreed upon as the number. It gave it a $111 million marketing budget, as well as $29 million to pay out in residuals, which is the money that's paid to the stars of the film, and other expenses. And when you add up those revenues and those expenses, Deadline estimates that Snow White, once all revenue streams are accounted for, will come up with a total loss of $115 million all in. There's no recouping that. There's no other place to get that money. That's how much money the movie is going to lose overall if Deadline's numbers are accurate. Let's look at my numbers on Snow White. And remember, this is just theatrical revenue. It doesn't include other revenue streams like what it would get for streaming TV. This is just box office dollars so far into Snow White's run. And when you look at it right here, the movie's done next to nothing in China. It's only getting about $240,000 back from the Chinese box office, $29.8 million so far, assuming a 40% share of international box office, $31.5 million from the movie's first week domestically, $7.8 from its second weekend so far. Now, we don't know what it's going to make from week 3 on, but the signs say that it's not going to be that much money. With the production budget of $270 million, I gave it a marketing budget of $100 million. Deadline says 111. For my purposes, I'm going to keep it at 100. That puts total costs for the movie at $370 million. Its worldwide gross right now is at $143.1 million. I estimate a net of $69.5 million against costs of $370. Right now, Snow White's theatrical losses are at about $300.4 million, which is what they would have to make up in other revenue streams. Now, there is going to be some more money coming in, but look at that net number. Right now, I have it at $69.5 million. Deadline's estimates basically would say that the movie is going to net $30.5 million more dollars at the worldwide box office. I'm just not so sure that's going to happen. The best days of Snow White are behind it, and those days weren't very good. We have another massive movie coming into the marketplace this weekend with a Minecraft movie, and I don't know if it can net $30 million more dollars, and if it can't, then that deficit that Deadline projected with all the revenue streams is just going to go up. However you want to cut it though, the bottom line is that Snow White is going to be a big money loser for Disney. And I was comfortable making that call last week. There were some people that gave me a little bit of grief saying, well, wait a minute, you can't say that after one weekend. Again, there's some movies you can say that with a degree of confidence, and there's some movies where you do have to do a wait and see type thing. I was confident last week in saying that this movie was not going to be a financial success. I think the numbers this weekend bear that out. And it's just another reason why you always have to keep in mind with the box office, it's not just the number you see. You got to dig into it a little bit. Or you know what? If you don't want to do that, that's what I'm here for. My member poll last week asked a pretty simple question. Why did Snow White disappoint at the box office? And according to the channel members who voted, 52% of them believed that it was remake burnout, that people were just sick and tired of Disney remakes. We'll see how that bears out with Lilo and Stitch later this year. 32% of the people who voted said that it was due to the film's quality or bad reviews. 12% said that it was because of the actor controversies, and only 4% cited high ticket prices and waiting for streaming as the reason why the movie disappointed. I do think that there is some burnout on remakes, but again, I also think that Lilo and Stitch is going to do very well. I think that How to Train Your Dragon, which I know isn't a Disney film, but is a live action remake, is going to do pretty well this summer. So it may just be specific live action remakes, or maybe don't do a remake of a movie that came out in the 1930s. I don't know. There's lots of lessons that need to be learned over at Disney. When we look at this past weekend, we actually had two of the best domestic openings of 2025 so far, if you want to use the word best for them. A Working Man actually had the fifth best debut of the year at $15.5 million. That's behind Mickey 17, Dogman, Snow White, and Captain America Brave New World. And The Chosen, Last Supper Part 1, had the 10th best debut for a film of 2025 at $11.7 million. We're going to talk about Minecraft in a couple of minutes because the way that it's tracking, it could be very, very high on this list next week. But before we do that, I wanted to ask the Charts with Dan trivia question for this week. Jason Statham has the #1 movie domestically right now, and I wanted to test your Jason Statham knowledge. So this week's question is, excluding sequels, so no sequels to Fast and Furious, etc., no sequels to any of his other movies. Excluding sequels, Jason Statham has appeared in 6 movies that opened at #1 at the domestic box office. What are they? I use the word appeared in because starred in is not necessarily the strongest term. In fact, appeared in is very apt for one of them. So I'll give you a couple more seconds to think them over, and here come the answers. The 6 movies are, of course, A Working Man, which just opened this past weekend, as well as Wrath of Man, The Meg, Spy, The Expendables, and Collateral. He did appear in Collateral very briefly, but he did appear in the movie. So those are Jason Statham's 6 non-sequel #1 openings. Let me know how many you got down in the comments below. I mentioned Princess Mononoke and its really strong performance this past weekend. It actually elevates Princess Mononoke to #4 all-time for Studio Ghibli, ahead of Spirited Away as far as official reported grosses. It's just behind Ponyo and The Secret World of Arrietty. And then, of course, we have The Boy and the Heron at #1, which really blazed new ground for Studio Ghibli at $46.8 million domestically. Well, we're at the end of March, which also means it's the end of the first quarter of the year, which is really hard to believe already. So it's time to update both the studio market share for 2025 so far and see how we're doing cumulatively at the box office versus previous years. Let's take a look first at the studio market share. It doesn't really change from the last time we looked at it. Disney, even though it's had some pretty disappointing box office results overall, still has the biggest percentage of ticket sales since January 1st. There's a hefty chunk of Mufasa included here because there was spillover business from the holidays. So 35% of the ticket sales so far this year have gone to Disney. 19.35% have gone to Universal. So those two studios easily with over half of the domestic ticket sales so far this year. The all other slice, which includes A24, Neon, Ketchup Entertainment, all those studios and distributors, is at 15%. Sony has 10.77% of all ticket sales so far this year. Paramount's at 8.19%, Lionsgate's at 5.14%, Warner Brothers is at just under 5%, and Amazon MGM, there's not even room for me to write their name on the slice, it's at 1.53%. And then we have cumulative domestic box office, which is total ticket sales from January 1st through March 30th. Let's look first of all at where we were near the end of February, and you could see that we weren't in a great position, but the 2025 box office was over $100 million ahead of where we were in 2024, and really only about $100 million behind where we were in 2023. Well, after a disappointing March, let's see what those numbers look like now, and it is a big difference. We are now almost $200 million behind where we were in 2024. So all those gains that we got versus 2024 in January and February, those were all given back and then some. We're about $300 million behind where we were in 2023 and really just barely ahead of where we were in 2022. So this was, as I suspected, a major setback for a year in which the studios and the theater chains thought that we were poised for a big comeback. Now we're just at the end of the first quarter. I think that theaters are going to get a big boost this upcoming weekend with Minecraft. At least it seems to be trending that way. But this was a March to forget. It was one of the worst post-pandemic months that we've had so far. And again, it's not because there was lack of product. There was just lack of interest. Now, a lot of people are hoping that this is going to change with a Minecraft movie, which opens on Friday. All of the box office tracking looks like it is trending up. The numbers are going up. We'll have to see. Sometimes things look like they're great and they don't turn out so great. But let's see what it needs to do to become one of the 5 highest opening video game-based movies of all time. And $58 million is the barrier that it needs to breach in order to knock the first Sonic the Hedgehog off of this chart. $60 million is where it needs to hit in order to get above Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And $72 million is where it needs to be in order to knock all of the Sonic movies back a peg. I have seen numbers saying 60 million, 50 million, 70 million, 80 million. If it gets to 80, it's at number 2 ahead of Five Nights at Freddy's. Honestly, I think this is going to be one of those movies that we just don't know how high or low it's going to go until those ticket sales come in. Kids' films, family films can be tough to track going into a weekend. But as I've said, it looks like it is trending in the right direction to be a very good opening weekend. We're just going to have to check in and see where we are a week from now. And because a Minecraft movie is the latest film hitting theaters based on a video game, I'm asking a different kind of member poll question. It's not exactly a poll, at least not the kind of poll I've done every week. I want to know, what is the best movie based on a video game? And here's how it's going to work. If you are a channel member, there's a community post up right now. Leave your favorite movie in the comments of the poll, or if your favorite is already there, give it an upvote. And the 5 movies with the most upvotes will be revealed here next week as the 5 favorites of our channel members that are based on a video game. If you're not a member of the channel, depending on how you're watching this, there might be a button for you to click, or there's definitely a link down in the description below. You don't just get to vote in member polls, you also get early access to a lot of my videos. You get custom badges and emoji to use in the chat, and I just love that extra degree of interactivity. So if you want to go advocate for your favorite video game movie, become a channel member here today, and we'll see the results of this poll next week. We have so much more to get to, but before we do, I want to thank the sponsor for this week's show. This video is brought to you by Chubbies. It's that time of year when those warm temperatures are starting to break through that winter ice. And on the warm days we've had so far this spring, I'm double excited because I get to break out my gear from Chubbies. Their Friday shirt is a particular favorite of mine, perfect for that spring or summer afternoon. No matter what activity you have planned, a barbecue, a round of golf, watching the flowers bloom, or reading an ad spot about how it's getting warmer outside, Chubbies has the style for any spring occasion. For example, Chubbies has stuff like the ultimate training shorts if you decide to take that early spring beach vacation, Or if you want to take a literal walk in the park, Chubby's original shorts give you a classic feel with a modern look. They even offer their everywhere shorts, which are perfect for anywhere and, well, everywhere. It's a play on words. You see how that works? You deserve a wardrobe upgrade for springtime, and for a limited time, Chubby's is giving fans of the show 20% off your order with my exclusive code DanMurrell at chubbyshorts.com. Plus, I can't forget Chubby's classic line swim collection. If you're not scared of sharks like I am and actually enjoy getting into the water at the beach, Chubby's swimsuits and their quick-drying 4-way stretch fabric are maybe the peak of human accomplishment. It's either that or NASA. Whether you're getting dressed for your workday, a workout, or a weekend getaway, Chubby's has you covered. For a limited time, Chubby's is giving fans of the show 20% off your order with my code DanMurrell at chubbyshorts.com. That's code DanMurrell at chubbyshorts.com. Support the show and tell them that I sent you. Don't blend in with the crowd. Stand out with Chubby's. Let's look outside the domestic marketplace now to the top 5 films internationally. This is all markets outside of the US and Canada. At number 1 is Snow White. It was able to maintain that number 1 spot at $22.1 million. A Working Man comes in at $15 million. Naja 2 comes in at $10.9 million, followed by L2 Imperon at $10.79 million. This is a sequel to 2019's Lucifer. It's a Malayalam language Indian action film, and it was actually met with some political controversy, resulting in the filmmakers agreeing to over a dozen changes to the film as it continues to play in theaters. Rounding out the top 5 internationally was Mickey 17 with $5.2 million. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with our domestic numbers, we get our top 5 films worldwide. And at number 1, but just barely, was Snow White, which dropped 58% worldwide for $36.3 million. Its worldwide total is now at $143.1 million. A Working Man brought in $30.2 million. L2 Imperon comes in at just over $12 million. Its total so far is at $19.4 million because it opened a little ahead of the weekend. The Chosen, Last Supper Part 1's domestic debut is enough to get it at number 4. And Naja 2 drops 28.6% worldwide for a $10.9 million weekend. Its worldwide total is now at $2.12 billion. There was a landmark that was hit by Captain America Brave New World over the past week. It cracked the $400 million mark worldwide. It's now about $7 million ahead of the Eternals. The question now is, does it have enough in the tank to make it ahead of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings at $432.2 million? I'm not so sure, but we'll see what happens. Returning to the domestic box office now, let's take a look at what I call our specialty charts, and we'll start with the top per theater averages for the past weekend. At number 1 is The Encampments, which brings in a really hefty $76,419 playing in just one theater in New York. The Encampments is a documentary about the pro-Palestine demonstrations that took place last year at Columbia University in New York City. And the release of this movie was actually moved up after one of the activists that's featured in the film, Mahmoud Khalil, was arrested by ICE and is currently in a detention facility facing possible deportation. In second place is The Friend, which played in 2 theaters and brought in $33,427 per theater. The Friend stars Naomi Watts, Bill Murray, and a giant Great Dane, all of whom are present on the poster. The Ballad of Wallace Island, which I mentioned on the show last week, comes in third place with $23,558 per theater in 4 theaters, followed by Princess Mononoke with $11,730 in 330 theaters. It was enough to make the top 10, and honestly, I think that there was money left on the table by not releasing it wider than it was. I certainly would have gone to see it this past weekend if it had been playing anywhere near me. Rounding out the top 5 is Holy Cow, which brought in $6,802 in its one theater. Holy Cow is a French film about a teenager who turns to cheese making when he's tasked with caring for his little sister. And when you look at the top per theater averages of the year so far, The Encampments actually takes number 1 by a wide margin, over $30,000, displacing Secret Mall Apartment, which just hit the number 1 spot last week. It brought in $42,519 and continues to play in limited release. Extremely Unique Dynamic is in third. The Friend actually puts up the 4th best per theater average of the year, so 2 entries from this past weekend. And The Brutalist, from the very first weekend of the year, gets bumped down to number 5. Looking at the top films in limited release, which I define as 1,000 theaters or fewer, Princess Mononoke, the 4K restoration, comes in number 1 at $3.8 million. In second place is L2 Imperon at $1.2 million in 610 theaters. Right behind is Mad Square with $1 million in an unknown number of theaters. Mad Square is another film from India, a Telugu language film, and is the sequel to 2023's Mad. Locked in 610 theaters brought in $175,000, and Magazine Dreams in 400 theaters brought in $147,000. Both of those movies with fairly substantial theater losses after their first opening weekend in limited release. Looking at the 2025 annual domestic box office chart, this is movies released this year. Captain America Brave New World remains number 1 at $196.6 million. Dogman is trying to get to $100 million. We'll see if it gets there. It's at $97.2 million. Snow White moves up 2 spots to number 3 at $66.9 million. One of Them Days and Paddington in Peru both drop down 1 spot to numbers 4 and 5. Mickey 17 is at 6. The Monkey is at 7. Den of Thieves 2 Pantera is at number 8. Hard Eyes is at number 9. And Flight Risk rounds out the top 10. Looking at the top 10 movies worldwide for 2025, of course, Ne Zha 2 remains number 1 at $2.1 billion. Detective Chinatown 1900 is in second place, followed by Captain America Brave New World and Creation of the Gods 2. Snow White enters the chart at number 5 with $143.1 million. Its placement on this chart gives it a better financial outlook than reality actually shows, but as of right now, it's a top 5 movie for 2025 so far. The rest of the top 10 all take a jump down from last week, and Chava from India drops out of the worldwide top 10. So that's all I've got for you from a box office standpoint, but let's look at an equally interesting week when it comes to streaming. And we'll start with the latest numbers from Netflix. New ones are coming out today, but this covers the week of March 17th through the 23rd, where Adolescence absolutely dominated the Netflix chart. With 42 million views in its second week, The Electric State had a bit of a drop in viewership in its first full week on the streaming service at 22.5 million. Adolescence, in contrast, almost doubled its viewership, at least the viewership it saw in its first few days. And it's still ranked and has been ranked as the top show on Netflix for the last week whenever I've checked. So I'm expecting a big number for Adolescence when we get the latest batch of Netflix numbers later today. In third place was The Twister, Caught in the Storm, which was the story of an actual tornado that hit Joplin, Missouri. It brought in 16.99 million views. Den of Thieves 2 Pantera debuted on Netflix to 8.38 million views, followed by The Resident Season 1, Netflix's comedy murder mystery set in the White House. That brought in 6.4 million views. Kraven the Hunter stays at number 6, followed by the Netflix original movie Revelations at number 7. A Quiet Place Day 1 debuts on the chart at 5.7 million views. Then we have the South Korean series When Life Gives You Tangerines and Plankton the Movie rounding out the top 10. And when we look at the best performances from Netflix series that we've seen so far this year, the second week of Adolescence with 42 million views is second only to Squid Game Season 2's second week with 58.12 million views. Adolescence Week 2 was able to best American Murder, Gabby Petito, the third week of Squid Game Season 2, and the debut of itself at 24.26 million views, so a big week 2 number for Adolescence. And when we look at overall weekly views for all programs on Netflix, Squid Game Season 2 leads the way with 58.12 million views in its second week. Then we have the first 2 weeks of Back in Action, which had a matching 46.79 million views. Adolescence put up the 4th best number for any program on Netflix this year at 42 million views, followed by American Murder, Gabby Petito at 31.3 million views. And when we look at the most watched shows on Netflix this year, Adolescence enters the chart at number 2 with 66.27 total views so far. That's about 60 million behind Squid Game Season 2, which is the number 1 show so far this year. Zero Day also putting up an impressive number at 51.86 million views. American Murder, Gabby Petito, and Missing You round out the top 5, and Adolescence's entry onto the list knocks out XO Kitty Season 2. When we look at the most watched Netflix movies of 2025, Back in Action easily remains number 1. The Electric State moves up one spot to number 4 at 47.73 million views, but I just don't think that's the number Netflix wanted or was hoping for from that film. The Secret Life of Pets 2 moves down to number 5. Despicable Me 4 joins the most watched movies of the year list at number 10, which knocks Honeymoon Crasher out of the top 10. And when we look at the overall most watched programs on Netflix in 2025, Back in Action is at number 1 at 130.89 million views, followed by Squid Game Season 2 and Adolescence at number 3. Ad Vitam and Counterattack round out the top 5. The Electric State is now the 8th most watched program this year on Netflix. That knocks out The Secret Life of Pets 2, as well as Kinda Pregnant, both of those movies making way for The Electric State and Adolescence. Let's take a look now at the numbers from Nielsen. Now, these are a little bit different from Netflix because they are domestic numbers only, and they're delayed by about a month because that's how long it takes Nielsen to crunch the data. So this is for the week of February 24th to March 2nd. When we look at the most watched movies, according to Nielsen for that week, no original films here. Despicable Me 4 is at number 1 at 15.35 million hours watched, followed by Venom: The Last Dance, making its debut on Netflix at 15.2 million hours watched. Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves also returning to the chart after a big absence at 7.3 million hours watched. To Catch a Killer's at number 4. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 debuts on the chart with 5.7 million hours watched. Then we have Counterattack and Watcher, followed by The Gorge, Trial by Fire, and Netflix's Squad 36. And looking at the best movie debuts on the Nielsen charts this year, Back in Action holds number 1 with 25.5 million hours watched, but Despicable Me 4 and Venom: The Last Dance for this week of February 24th to March 2nd had the second and third best debuts we've seen for a movie so far domestically, ahead of the original films Kinda Pregnant and You're Cordially Invited. I think this is just a reminder of how important it is for these different streaming services to rely on library titles in addition to original movies. And when we look at the performances for movies in all weeks of the year, regardless of whether they were debuting or not, Back in Action holds the top 2 spots, followed by Despicable Me 4 and Venom: The Last Dance. Kinda Pregnant rounds out that top 5. Back in Action also remains the most watched movie on streaming in the US through March 2nd, according to Nielsen. To Catch a Killer debuts on the chart at number 6, and The Gorge debuts at number 9. Despicable Me 4 hits the chart at number 10, which knocks Aftermath, The Wild Robot, and Furiosa: A Mad Max Saga off of the 2025 top 10. Looking at the most watched streaming shows for February 24th to March 2nd, Reacher and Zero Day both put up great numbers, nearly identical numbers. Reacher is at number 1 at 24.7 million hours watched in the midst of its third season. Zero Day comes in second place at 24.6 million. They basically switched from the week before. Love is Blind also putting up a really impressive number, 20.2 million hours watched. The debut of Running Point on Netflix comes in fourth place at 17.4 million hours watched. Family Guy comes in 5th place. Bluey comes in 6th place. The White Lotus returns to the top 10 on Max at 13.45 million hours watched. And given what we know now, which is that in the weeks since March 2nd, which is the data that we're looking at, White Lotus numbers have continued to go up. I think that we're going to continue to see this on the most watched streaming shows list. Grey's Anatomy is at number 8, 1923 is at number 9, and NCIS is at number 10. When we look at the Nielsen top shows as far as watch time per available episode, so it's total hours watched divided by the number of available episodes, Zero Day tops the chart easily at 4.1 million hours watched per episode, followed by the Hulu docuseries Devil in the Family at 3.16 million hours watched per episode. American Murder: Gabby Petito's in third place at 2.79 million hours watched per episode, followed by Running Point at 1.74 million. Paradise on Hulu continuing to do well at 1.35 million. Reacher at 1.24 million, and 1923 at 1.13 million. It's rare that we have more than 2 or 3 shows averaging over 1 million hours watched per episode, so this is a really strong week of TV viewership. The White Lotus is in 8th at 840,000 hours per episode. Severance continuing to perform well at 647,000 hours per episode, and Yellow Jackets rounding out the top 10. Looking at the most watched library streaming series for 2025 so far, this is through March 2nd. These are non-original series. Bluey is at number 1, followed by Grey's Anatomy, which moves up to 2nd place. Bob's Burgers moves down 1 spot to number 3. Family Guy's in 4th. The Big Bang Theory is in 5th. NCIS moves up to number 6. Younger moves down to number 7. And then the top 10 is rounded out by Dexter, The Rookie, and Law & Order SVU. When we look at the most watched original streaming series of the year through March 2nd, Squid Game is at number 1 at 166.1 million hours watched. Not too far behind is The Night Agent at 152 million hours watched. Landman is at number 3, but look at Severance. It's moved up to number 4 at 71.7 million hours watched. This was a show that barely, if ever, reached the streaming charts in its first season, so there's a huge surge in popularity and watch time for Severance, at least according to the Nielsen numbers. American Primeval moves down to 5th. Love is Blind moves up to number 6. Zero Day and Reacher both entered the most watched original series of the year chart at numbers 7 and 8. Virgin River moves down to number 9, and Sweet Magnolias moves down to number 10. The Recruit and Beast Games are knocked off the list by Zero Day and Reacher. And we have one quick update to the most watched original streaming series since Nielsen started reporting numbers in 2020. Love is Blind moves up to number 3 behind Stranger Things and Ozark. Virgin River moves down to number 4. Bridgerton moves to number 5. Cobra Kai, boosted by its most recent season, moves up to number 6, surpassing The Crown. Manifest is at number 8. Squid Game's at number 9. And The Great British Baking Show is at number 10. And that wraps us up for Charts with Dan this week. Before I go, I want to mention a few things that you might be interested in watching at home or in theaters. First of all, today we have some recent theatrical releases that are going to be made available for digital and premium video on demand, which are those higher price rentals. Black Bag is available for digital purchase and premium video on demand today, as well as Paddington in Peru and Opus. So if you missed any of those movies in theaters, you can watch them at home. On Thursday, we have the release of Devil May Cry on Netflix, which is getting an 8-episode anime adaptation. Also debuting Thursday on Netflix is Pulse, which is a Netflix original medical drama starring Willa Fitzgerald. It's weird how things come around because medical shows are once again kind of the big exciting thing on TV. I myself lived through the ER Chicago Hope rivalry of the mid-90s. Opening in theaters on Friday, of course, the big release is a Minecraft movie. I'll have my review for that here probably Friday morning. I'm going to go see it on Thursday. I've never played 1 second of Minecraft in my life, so I'm interested to see what I think of the movie from that perspective. Also in wide release is Hell of a Summer, which was co-written and co-directed by and co-stars Finn Wolfhard. An older camp counselor played by Fred Heckinger returns to camp with a new group of teens, only for a slasher to begin chopping through everybody. Neon threw their weight behind the movie to distribute it, so you should be able to see that in a theater near you. Also, The Chosen Last Supper Part 2 hits theaters this upcoming weekend. In more limited release, we have Freaky Tales, which is from directors Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck. It's an anthology movie taking place in 1980s Oakland, California, featuring an ensemble cast that includes Pedro Pascal, Jay Ellis, Ben Mendelsohn, and Angus Cloud. It premiered out of competition at Sundance this year. Eric LaRue is also opening in limited release. Michael Shannon directs this movie about a mother, played by Judy Greer, of a teenage murderer who tries to move on with her life. Alexander Skarsgård co-stars in the film. Also in limited release is The Luckiest Man in America. Paul Walter Hauser plays Michael Larson, a contestant on the game show Press Your Luck, who managed to crack the show's code and win massive amounts of money. This is based on a real incident that happened. It's actually a really fascinating story. On Hulu, you can catch the premiere of the new series Dying for Sex. Michelle Williams stars as a woman diagnosed with cancer who decides to fully explore her sexuality. And if you want to see a theatrical release at home, Y2K, it's making its debut on Max. So if you missed that A24 release from, I think it was late last year or early this year, then you can catch it at home on Max this Friday. And that's all I've got for you. Be sure to stay tuned right here for the latest news coming out of CinemaCon. All of the major studios have a presentation, and I'm sure that we're going to have something exciting to talk about. And of course, I'll also be here doing movie reviews and all the things that you, I hope, enjoy seeing me do. Thanks to Chubbies for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check the description below for more about them. But most of all, thank you for watching this episode. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.